November 8, 1935. In a small medical clinic in Sceaux, France, a miracle and a tragedy occurred simultaneously. Alain Delon gave birth to identical twin boys, two perfect mirror images of each other, who would grow up to live completely different lives, never knowing the other existed. The France of 1935 was a nation still struggling with economic hardship. Fabienne and her husband Antoine were already barely surviving on Antoine's modest income as a butcher's assistant. The prospect of feeding and clothing one child seemed almost impossible. Supporting two identical boys was simply beyond their means. In the hours following the birth, as Fabienne held her two newborn sons, the family faced an impossible decision. Antoine's sister Marie, who had been unable to have children of her own, had moved to a remote village in the Auvergne region with her husband. She had begged for years to adopt a child, promising to provide a loving home and never reveal the biological parentage. With hearts breaking but seeing no alternative, the family made a choice that would haunt them for 8 decades. They would keep one twin, the boy they named Alain, and secretly give the other to Marie and her husband to be raised as their own son, André. The deception was elaborate and complete. Official records were altered. André's birth certificate listed Marie and her husband as his biological parents. The doctor who delivered the twins was paid to keep silent. Even the hospital records were modified to show only one birth. From that moment forward, André's existence was erased from the Delon family history. What followed were two parallel lives that would unfold with eerie similarities despite completely different circumstances. Alain grew up in Bourg-la-Reine, developing the confidence and charisma that would eventually make him one of cinema's greatest stars. Meanwhile, André grew up in rural Auvergne, believing Marie and her husband were his biological parents, developing a love of mechanics and a quiet, contemplative personality. The similarities between the twins were remarkable, even separated by hundreds of miles and completely different upbringings. Both boys were naturally left-handed, but forced by their schools to write with their right hands. Both developed a distinctive way of tilting their heads slightly when thinking. Both had an unusual fear of confined spaces that seemed to have no explanation in their individual experiences. As they grew older, the parallels became even more striking. Both were drawn to working with their hands, Alain through acting and physical performance, André through mechanical repair and craftsmanship. Both had a tendency toward melancholy that seemed to come from nowhere. Both experienced vivid dreams that felt more like memories of places they had never been. Most remarkably, both twins experienced what they privately thought of as phantom pains, moments when they would suddenly feel injured or ill for no apparent reason, only to recover completely within hours. Neither ever spoke about these experiences, but they occurred throughout their lives with uncanny synchronicity. Alain's path to stardom began in his early 20s, when his striking looks and natural screen presence launched him into European cinema. By the 1960s, he was one of the most recognizable faces in the world, starring in classics like Purple Noon, The Leopard, and Le Samouraï. His image graced magazine covers across the globe, and his romantic relationships with actresses like Romy Schneider made international headlines. Meanwhile, André lived a quiet life as a mechanic in the small village of Saint-Flour. He married a local teacher named Claire, raised 2 children, and earned a reputation as someone who could fix anything mechanical. Neighbors often commented that André bore a striking resemblance to the famous actor Alain Delon, but André would laugh off the comparison, never imagining how close to the truth their observations were.
Throughout their parallel lives, both twins experienced moments of inexplicable sadness or joy that seemed to have no connection to their current circumstances. Alain would sometimes wake from dreams feeling as though he had lost something precious, though he could never identify what. André would occasionally feel overwhelmed by a sense of incompleteness, as though he was living only half of his intended life. The secret was maintained through the decades by a conspiracy of silence that involved multiple family members. Marie and her husband never told André the truth about his parentage. Antoine and Fabienne took their secret to their graves. Even when Alain became famous and his face appeared regularly in magazines and films that André would have seen, no one in André's life ever suggested the resemblance might be more than coincidental. As the years passed and both twins entered their 70s and 80s, they each began experiencing similar health issues, problems with their hearts, joints that ached in cold weather, and a gradual loss of hearing in their left ears. These parallel health challenges occurred simultaneously, though neither was aware of the other's condition. In August 2023, as Alain's health began to decline seriously, his elderly Aunt Marie, now 91 and living in a care facility, made a decision that would change everything. Facing her own mortality and tormented by nearly 9 decades of keeping the secret, she asked to speak privately with Alain during one of his visits. What she told him that afternoon left Alain completely speechless. She revealed that he had an identical twin brother who had been living in the Auvergne region his entire life, completely unaware of his true identity. She provided André's current address, explained the circumstances that had led to the separation, and begged for Alain's forgiveness for the decades of deception. The emotional impact on Alain was overwhelming. At 88 years old, he discovered that everything he thought he knew about his identity was incomplete. The inexplicable feelings of incompleteness that had followed him throughout his life suddenly made sense. The phantom pains, the vivid dreams, the sense that he was searching for something he couldn't name, all of it now had an explanation. Alain's first impulse was anger. How could his family have kept such a monumental secret for so long? How could they have allowed him to live his entire life not knowing that half of himself was missing? But as the initial shock wore off, the anger was replaced by an overwhelming desire to meet the twin he had never known existed. Working with private investigators to confirm the information and locate André, Alain learned remarkable details about his twin's life. André had indeed lived in Saint-Flour for most of his adult life, working as a mechanic until his retirement. He was married, had 2 grown children, and was known in his community as a gentle, thoughtful man who bore an uncanny resemblance to the famous actor Alain Delon. The approach to André had to be handled with extraordinary delicacy. At 88 years old, learning that your entire understanding of your identity was false could be devastating. The investigators first contacted André's son, explaining the situation and providing DNA evidence that confirmed the relationship. André's family was initially skeptical, then amazed, and finally deeply moved by the revelation. When André was finally told the truth about his parentage, his reaction was complex. Like Alain, he experienced initial shock, followed by anger at the deception, but ultimately overwhelming curiosity about the brother he had never known existed. The explanation for all the inexplicable experiences of his life, the strange dreams, the phantom pains, the persistent sense that something was missing, suddenly became clear. The first contact between the twins was a phone call arranged by their respective families. When Alain's voice came through the phone, André later said, it was like hearing his own voice from across a vast distance. They spoke for over 2 hours, comparing memories, experiences, and photographs. The parallels in their lives were so extensive that both men were left with a profound sense of wonder about the mysterious connections that bind identical twins. The decision to meet in person was immediate and mutual. Despite their advanced age and declining health, both twins felt an urgent need to see each other face to face. The meeting was arranged at a private location in central France, halfway between Alain's home and André's village. The moment when the twins first saw each other was described by witnesses as extraordinary. Despite being 88 years old and having lived completely different lives, they were still virtually identical in appearance. The same facial structure, the same way of moving, even the same unconscious gestures. When they embraced for the first time, both men broke down crying, overcome by emotions that they struggled to put into words.
Their conversation during that first meeting revealed the extent to which their lives had paralleled each other despite their separation. Both had lost their first tooth on the same day. Both had experienced their first heartbreak at age 16. Both had married women named with variations of the name Claire. Both had children who chose careers related to their father's professions. Alain's son became an actor, while André's son became an automotive engineer. Even more remarkably, both twins had experienced significant life events on the same dates. Alain's breakthrough role in Purple Noon began filming on the exact day that André opened his own mechanic shop. Alain's marriage to Alain Delon occurred within hours of André's wedding to his Claire. Even their health crises had occurred simultaneously. Both had heart attacks within the same week in 2019, neither knowing about the other's medical emergency. The reunion transformed both men in their final years. For the first time in their lives, the persistent sense of incompleteness that had followed them both finally disappeared. They began speaking regularly by phone, sharing stories about their parallel lives and marveling at the similarities that genetics had created despite their different environments. André was invited to visit Alain's estate in Switzerland, where he saw for the first time the life of luxury and fame that his identical twin had achieved. Rather than feeling envious, André expressed gratitude for his own quieter life and strong family bonds. "We each got what we needed," he told Alain during that visit. "You got the stage, and I got the workshop, but with the same person underneath." Alain, meanwhile, visited André's village and met the family and community that had shaped his twin's life. He was struck by the depth of relationships that André had built through 8 decades of stability and consistency. "You got something I never had," Alain told his brother. "You got to be yourself without the world watching." The story of the reunion made international headlines when the twins decided to share their experience publicly. Genetic researchers were fascinated by the documented parallels between their separated lives. Psychologists studied their case as an example of the mysterious bonds that connect identical twins even when they are unaware of each other's existence. But beyond the scientific interest, the story touched millions of people around the world who were moved by the brothers' determination to make the most of the time they had left together. Despite having been separated for nearly 9 decades, they formed a close bond in their final years, speaking daily and visiting each other regularly, until Alain's death in 2024. André survived his twin by only 6 months, passing away peacefully in his sleep. His family said that after Alain's death, André seemed to lose some essential part of himself, as though the connection that had finally been restored was too strong to survive separation again. Their story became a powerful reminder that the bonds of family and genetics can transcend even the most extreme circumstances. The twins, who had been torn apart by poverty and desperation at birth, had found each other again in their final years, proving that some connections are too fundamental to be permanently severed by time, distance, or deception. The reunion also sparked widespread interest in genealogical research and DNA testing. Thousands of people who had always felt an inexplicable sense of incompleteness began investigating their own family histories, wondering if they too might have unknown siblings living parallel lives. Several other cases of separated twins came to light as a direct result of the publicity surrounding Alain and André's story. Genetic counselors reported a dramatic increase in requests for family history analysis, with many clients specifically asking about the possibility of unknown siblings. The case became a catalyst for broader discussions about the ethics of family secrets and the psychological impact of hidden genetic relationships. The twin story also influenced research into what scientists call genetic synchronicity, the phenomenon where identical twins separated at birth experience parallel life events despite having no contact. Several universities launched studies based on Alain and André's documented experiences, hoping to better understand the mechanisms that create these mysterious connections. Dr. Elizabeth Fontaine, a geneticist at the University of Lyon who studied the twins' case extensively, noted, "The parallels in their lives go far beyond what we would expect from shared genetics alone. Their simultaneous health crises, parallel life choices, and even the timing of major life events suggest connections that we don't yet fully understand scientifically."
The documentation of their parallel experiences became valuable to researchers studying nature versus nurture. Despite completely different environments, one growing up in urban France with aspirations toward entertainment, the other in rural France with practical, mechanical interests, the twins had developed remarkably similar personalities, preferences, and even health patterns. Most striking to researchers was the discovery that both twins had maintained detailed personal journals throughout their adult lives. When these journals were compared after their reunion, the parallels were extraordinary. They had recorded similar dreams on the same nights, experienced periods of unexplained sadness or joy on identical dates, and even had comparable reactions to major world events despite consuming different media sources. André's journal contained multiple entries about dreams involving a shadow brother who lived a glamorous life in distant cities. Alain's journal documented recurring dreams about a lost twin who worked with his hands in peaceful countryside settings. Neither had interpreted these dreams literally, but both had been profoundly affected by them throughout their lives. The psychological impact of their reunion extended beyond the twins themselves to their respective families. Alain's children found themselves with an uncle they had never known existed, along with cousins who were essentially genetic half-siblings. André's family experienced the surreal situation of suddenly being connected to one of the most famous actors in European history. Both twins expressed profound gratitude for the time they were able to spend together, despite feeling robbed of a lifetime of shared experiences. They often spoke about what their lives might have been like if they had grown up together, but without bitterness about the circumstances that had separated them. "We got to be complete people separately," André reflected in one of their final recorded conversations. "Maybe if we had grown up together, we would have been too similar, too dependent on each other. This way, we each developed our own strengths and could appreciate what the other had become." If this incredible story of hidden family secrets and miraculous reunions touched your heart, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who believes in the power of family bonds and the mysterious connections that shape our lives. And tell us in the comments, do you believe that twins separated at birth maintain invisible connections throughout their lives? Because sometimes the most profound relationships exist even when we don't know they're there, waiting for the right moment to be discovered and celebrated.